I think I agree with you. The other spot that I'm really looking at right now is trying to figure out what Minnesota does.
Oh well, I can tell
Because
you, they're really in a hard way in terms of the finances here because so like one way of putting this is they are 20 million below next. So this isn't for the coming year; it's for the year below, the year after. They're 20 million below the tax with nothing for Jaden McDaniels or Mike Conley, and that includes waiving Shake Milton and Troy Brown Jr. who have non guarantees. They either ownership is going to pony up and pay one of the biggest bills we've seen in non-Balmer, non-Leica, iterations, or they're going to lose someone good, someone real good.
they need to make some sort of move here. It just has, like, we're at the point where it's going to have to come. We're at a pressure point for them. And we're at that pressure point in part. And I think they'll probably go through with like the first half of this season and see what the Carl Towns, Rudy Gobert thing looks like, given the
Mm-hmm.
fact that we didn't get a chance to see much of it last year. The Towns injury last year, more than anything, really hindered Minnesota's decision making in terms of its future, even more than like what their overall import was last year, right? Whether or not they could win a title last year. I don't think many people thought they'd win a title. I think that people thought that like maybe they would contend and be a really good regular season team and then they'd be ready to go this season. I don't think that really changes given the fact they've had an off season together now. Hopefully they've had a chance to like really grow and mature. I think that it just extended out that window of uncertainty above all. And
It
now they have
did.
like a real level. Like if you were engaged in the Carl Towns, Rudy Gobert combination, which I think that Minnesota is probably more optimistic on that front than anybody else is maybe a fair way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't know if you have the answer yet on that. And you're going to have to go through part of this season at least and find out. And then you're going to have to find out what the actual market is for Towns and Gobert and figure out what the overall fit is with Anthony Edwards, because Anthony Edwards' presence in Minnesota is what makes this so important. Because as we've seen for Team USA, as we have seen throughout the latter portion of last season, Anthony Edwards looks like a future top 10 player in the league at this point. And that's putting it conservatively, I think. There's a chance he's a top 5 guy at some point. And how Minnesota handles this now over the course of the next year is going to be really, really important in terms of figuring out the trajectory of the league, but also the trajectory of this potential top 5 guy in the league's career.
It is, and the finances are one part of it, but also like the quality of the team on the court is another. And one consideration, not that I think that Minnesota will handle it in this way with however we're defining their ownership group because it's still the awkward transition between Taylor and Laurie and A-Rod and everything else
Yeah.
is technically speaking, you don't have to your tax number is not calculated until the end of that season. So they could theoretically start for the Rover and then shed during. But the problem is, A, with the salary floor the way it is now, and B, just as a practical consideration with the nature of how
Mm-hmm.
people are handling financial risk or really any kind of risk, we don't really see that. So the idea is that some version of Ducks are going to need to be in a row by October 1st and probably by July 15th. Like that's just
Yeah.
the way that this is going to work. Doesn't have to be July 1st, but July 15th, I think by that point, you need to know. And what Minnesota's, I think the biggest question that Tim Connolly and ownership, because again, ownership level conversation, needs to figure out is how essential is Karl Anthony Towns to that?
Yeah.
Because while in an ideal world, I think you'd rather keep Towns than Gobert and you could potentially keep both and lose a lot of other support things. Like we'll say Edwards is the only set piece you can write it down in indelible ink for the near term. Is the problem is I think that there will be problem. The situation is that there will be more suitors for Towns. He's younger, he's intriguing, and like the last couple of years have been weird, but like he still is a very talented player. Whereas Gobert is more of a known commodity, and I think his age is a little bit of a deterrent. And so I think that there's a chance that even though the Wolves like Towns better, I'm not saying they do, but like I believe that there's a reasonable case that they still end up saving the money by moving him because there are more suitors and because you can build it's actually more straightforward to build a great team with Edwards, McDaniels, maybe Conley, maybe not, and what you can get for Towns, than that replacing Towns and Gobert.
Are we sure that Towns' contract, which will pay him $62 million in 2027-28, is more valuable than Gobert's, who will only make $46 million in 2025-26 before expiring on a player option, by the way?
We are not. However, the general, though not exclusive, understanding, and I think of Russell Westbrook for this because he got traded so many times in the contract, is that broadly speaking, there will always be a few front offices around the league that say, is this player worth it or could they be worth it now? Yeah. And then you just say whatever happens after that. Incidentally, that's probably part of the logic Minnesota used with the Gobert contract. It doesn't necessarily lead to good trades, but it can lead to viable trade partners. And that's really what they're looking for.
And look, the Washington deal with Russell Westbrook ended up returning Kyle Kuzma, right?
Right.
And Kyle Kuzma, whatever you think of him, probably at the very least a top 70 player in the league, something like that, right? Like he's a top half of the league starter at the very least, I would say. And that's if you think low of him, right?
Sure.
Like you're at least getting back somebody of real import and value, I say at that point. So Minnesota is one I'm really looking at.